There are plenty of seats up front, so don't be afraid. It looks like we're just about set. Well, good evening, everyone. I'm Lori Novick. I'm Executive Director of Let's Get Ready. And on behalf of Barnard and Let's Get Ready, I am pleased to welcome you to what is going to be a very exciting conversation about the latest issues, challenges, and innovations in college access and success. We have a small panel tonight, but it is power-packed. And we're deeply grateful to Barnard President Debora Spar and your Public Library President Anthony Marx for sharing their time and expertise with us. We're also deeply grateful to Jennifer Von Diller, Dean of Admissions at Barnard and a Let's Get Ready board member, as well as Judy Bigelow and Evan Myers, two other Let's Get Ready board members, for their support in making this event possible. For those of you who aren't familiar with Let's Get Ready, we provide low-income high school students with SAT prep and help with the college admissions process. And we do this by using volunteer college students as tutors, as mentors, and role models, and partnering with colleges like Barnard, high schools and community organizations. We serve about 2,500 students throughout the Northeast a year. All of us in the audience tonight come from a wide variety of fields, different backgrounds, different programmatic approaches, but the common thread that binds us all is that we're all really committed to closing the country's achievement gap. And it's our hope that after tonight's panel, you'll all be in better position to continue and build on all the great work that you've been doing. So now it's my pleasure to welcome our moderator, Dr. James Peterson. Dr. Peterson is Director of Africana Studies at Lehigh. He's the founder of Hip Hop Scholars, and he's a frequent commentator on TV. I just saw him Monday night on the Ed Show on MSNBC, and he was great. And he's also a really good friend of Let's Get Ready. So it's my pleasure to welcome Dr. Peterson.
Thank you for that. Good evening. Good evening. Yes, it's really an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. Let's Get Ready, in my mind, is one of the most important organizations and community-oriented entities that I've had the privilege to work with, and I'm just really excited to be here and be here with our distinguished guests. Just want to do a little informal survey before we get started. I know we have a wealth of knowledge and a wealth of wealth in this room, as well as expertise and other things, but I just wanted, can you please raise your hand if you're from higher education, nonprofit, high school students, volunteers? I just want to go through and see how we split these things up. So folks from higher ed, that's great. Folks from nonprofit organizations, high school students, that's awesome. That's awesome. Volunteers, the ever important funders, yes. Policymakers. That's awesome. So you can see we have a spectrum, a cross-section of folk that we need to continue to do this very, very important work. Now it's my honor and privilege to introduce our distinguished guests, and we hope to have a very, very lively conversation. First, I'd like to introduce to you President Debora Spar. Dr. Spar has been a vocal proponent of women's education and leadership, spearheading initiatives that include the Athena Center for Leadership Studies, an interdisciplinary study center devoted to the theory and practice of women's leadership, and Barnard's Global Symposium Series, an annual gathering of high-profile and accomplished female leaders held each year in a different region of the world. For those of you who are not on the inside of the academy, you should note that anytime we say global, that means really important work for us, because the university system is really deeply invested in reaching beyond its sort of national boundaries. Dr. Spar is a political scientist by training. Her scholarly research focuses on issues of international political economy, examining how rules are established in new or emerging markets, and how firms and governments together shape the evolving global economy. She is a graduate of Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service and received her doctorate in government from Harvard. She's also a member of the Academy of Arts and Sciences and currently serves as a trustee of the Nightingale Bamford School and a director of Goldman Sachs. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Spar. Our second guest this evening is Dr. Anthony Marx. Dr. Marx, president of Amherst College and a distinguished political scientist himself, became the New York Public Library's president and CEO on July 1st, 2011. That's just when I started. As Amherst president, Dr. Marx earned wide recognition for his passionate promotion of accessibility to higher education for lower-income students. Prior to joining Amherst in 2003, Dr. Marx served as professor and then director of undergraduate studies of political science at Columbia University, where he spearheaded a number of secondary school initiatives. In the 1980s, he helped found Kanya College, a South African secondary school that prepared more than 1,000 black students for university. A native New Yorker, Dr. Marx attended Public School 98 and the Bronx High School of Science. He then attended Wesleyan and Yale, where he graduated magna cum laude with a BA in 1981. He received his MPA from the Woodrow Wilson School at Princeton University in 1986, then earned MA and PhD degrees from Princeton in 1987 and 1990. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Marx. Now I'm going to take my seat and get this party started. It's good to be back. Now we have this script, and I'm going to stick to the script because I know there are things that the folks at Let's Get Ready want us to really tackle and wrestle with tonight. But you should feel free to go off script if and when.
We don't have a script.
But right, you know,
We're
so.
off script.
And I think to start off with, and because you past college president, current college president, you know, I wonder if you could share with the audience from your perspective, and maybe there's more than three, but could you share with the audience what the top three barriers or issues are for students, particularly low-income and first-generation students? What do they face in terms of trying to get access to a university education? Top three challenges. See basketball.
Well, first let me say it's an honor to be here and distinguished audience, this great institution. I'm proud to be a trustee of Barnard College, so all the more proud to be here with our distinguished president and with James. Barriers to entry. I guess I'll start with three. They're pretty straightforward. One is money. Yeah, it's expensive to go to college. Even with generous financial aid, it's expensive to go to college. Colleges cost a lot. And there are lots of people, particularly people who don't come from more privileged backgrounds or middle class or upper middle class backgrounds, who don't even understand the financial aid system, who see the sticker price and say, forget it, that's not me, that is impossible. And that's the end of the story, because they're not in that, in the world that understands where that's common understanding, or certainly in a world where they can assume that they can afford that. It's sort of the perfect disaster as a financial advertising model, right? At Amherst, 2/3 of the students didn't pay the sticker price. The college actually, it cost more per student by almost 50% to educate each student, so those who were paying the full sticker price weren't paying the real cost. But the people who couldn't afford the sticker price were scared away by the sticker price and didn't fully understand the financial aid system. So money. Second is the quality, the inequality of the quality of K through 12 education in America. Simple fact. And I'm not even talking about the outliers here. If you think about the per student expenditure in a district that has low amounts of money to spend because the real estate values are low, compared to high amounts of money to spend, the ratio is 7 to 1 in America. Now, I'm sure we can find some educational scholars who will say that it's not money, it's money. There's a reason why people send their kids to private school. It's money, right? You spend 7 times as much, you're going to get higher quality. It's not guaranteed, and may not be 7 times the quality. And there may be schools in institutions, thank God, that are not 1/7 of the quality of those of the sort of higher income neighborhoods, but it's money. And then third is admissions bias. It's not intentional admissions bias, but it's bias. We say it's a level playing field. We want to see your SATs. We pretend that coaching doesn't help. It helps. There's a reason why people pay for coaching. Don't listen to the College Board on this. Sorry, I think they're wrong. What other examples? All those great extracurriculars, right? So, extracurriculars are expensive, right? Learning to play lacrosse from age 5 on is not cheap, right? It's not. And you have to have time for the extracurriculars. A student who has to work at the 7-Eleven to help make ends meet at home isn't going to have time for those extracurriculars, let alone the weekend trip to Honduras to build houses for poor people, right? I'm not making that up, right? So it's a bias. So money, K through 12 education, and admissions bias, unintentional, part of America, unintentionally, but it's real in terms of its impact.
Well, I would agree wholeheartedly with every single word that Tony just said. The 3 things he pointed to are critically important, and just to not repeat them, I'll come up with 3 different ones that are actually kind of the same thing, but I'll frame them slightly differently. I'd say the 3 biggest obstacles to low-income kids getting into colleges like the one we're sitting in now: elementary school, middle school, and high school, which is really the same way of phrasing what Tony just said. If you look at what happens to an average kid over the course of those incredibly precious years from 5 to 17 or 18, the kid who's coming from a low-income, perhaps first generation, perhaps non-English speaking home is at a disadvantage every single step of the way. And those disadvantages only compound over the course of their school career. So, and zillions of studies have shown this. You take exactly, or essentially the identical same 5-year-old, same level of native intelligence, same level of intellectual curiosity. You put one in an expensive, fancy schmancy New York private school, you put the other one in something that's not a fancy schmancy New York private school, and by the time those 2 kids have graduated or moved on from elementary school, the one from the poorer background, the poorer school, is already several grade levels below his or her peer at the elementary school level. Then you put these kids into middle school, where the learning environment disadvantages get compounded by, first of all, the social pressures that exist in every middle school in this country, but made worse by social pressures, family pressures, adolescent pressures. And then you put these, and the kids fall farther and farther behind who are coming from the disadvantaged home. And then you put the kids in high school, which is the point we actually sort of start to worry about them, but they're already 2 to 3 to 4 years behind even the best high school in the country, which they're not in, is not going to be sufficient to account for those baked-in differences. And then, exactly as Tony said, they're not getting extracurriculars in high school because that's just not part of their world. They're going to be pulled by social pressures that are completely different than the social pressures, which have problems of their own, that the rich kids are experiencing in the fancy schmancy private schools. And almost always they're coming from homes that don't know the ins and outs of the college application process. It is a complicated process. It is a mysterious, enigmatic, quixotic process. And if you haven't gone through it yourself, it's very hard to advise your 16, 17-year-old how to go through it. And so I think one of the greatest frustrations I feel in my job, and I know Jennifer and I have had this conversation countless times, and she's had it with her staff millions of times. We see these kids applying from high school, and these are the ones who already have the gumption and the smarts and the wherewithal to even think of applying to a place like Barnard. And some of them we can take because by hook or by crook, they've done what they needed to do, and some we just can't take. No matter how much we might want to, because we can see that spark and we can see that gumption. They haven't had the preparation. They haven't had the skills baked in, and we're just terrified that if we do take them, we're setting them up to fail. So there are a million things that the colleges can be doing better around questions of access, but we are taking the product that reaches us at 17 or 18, and by that stage, there's already so much that has gone wrong in the life of most kids, not all, but most kids coming from poor or minority backgrounds, particularly poor kids.
I really like this next question because a lot of times when we're on panels and we have these kinds of conversations, people will come away from it thinking, well, we didn't really talk about any solutions, or we didn't talk about any of the sort of answers. We just listed all the problems. So I'm glad that we're going here right now. And I guess we'll kick it back to you. You know, what's being done to address these challenges? And I think we're particularly interested in things that you're familiar with and things that you have worked on yourself, but also interested in what kinds of things are scalable. You know, what kinds of things can actually address the magnitude of the problems that you guys just detailed for us.
So it's a great question. First of all, let me just confess, you know, Amherst has done things that at least I'm proud of and that I think the college is proud of in terms of its access issues. It's not a coincidence that Amherst is also a wealthy institution. You know, we're talking about socioeconomic disadvantage. It takes socioeconomic wherewithal to address. It's, you know, sort of basic, hard to avoid fact. But it also takes a willingness of an institution, as Barnard has done, as Columbia has done, and others have done, to step up to the plate and say this is worth the fight, and not to, for instance, be taken in by the false arguments, in my view, that, for instance, if you take these issues seriously, you'll somehow hurt alumni giving. For example, we found at Amherst that taking these issues seriously brought the largest donations in the history of the college. People were moved inspired to, you know, just as many of you are, by these issues, because they're the issues of the day, right? They are the issues that are driving this presidential election, and people want to see them solved. They don't want to just hear what's wrong. Right. They want to see them solved. So on to solutions. You know, we worked with a group called QuestBridge. We found that they had great networks and could bring us applicants we couldn't find for ourselves. You got to be open to applicants you can't find for yourself. There are other ways in which Amherst did it, and it's easy enough to do, which is to ask your alumni and your current students and your faculty and your staff to go to schools where they haven't been before, to go to neighborhoods they haven't been before, and, you know, explain it, right? If the social networks in those neighborhoods don't explain it, we need to explain it. People seem eager to do that. But I'll give you just one example that I loved at Amherst. We decided to use the work-study money, or a chunk of the work-study money. I should tell you, work-study money was designated by Congress not to pad the budgets of institutions, nor to pay people to sit happily doing their homework in the library while they're at a desk or wherever. Those are, I guess, important functions. The work-study legislation was about service. So we decided to take that seriously. Again, I suppose it's easier for us. We could afford to do so. So we said to our low-income students, we want you to be of service to help make this pipeline work. And we want you to become mentors, electronically, telephonically, however, to the best students from around the country that we could find who come from underprivileged backgrounds. And give them advice, because in too many public, at least public high schools in America, there are no college counselors anymore. I haven't checked recently, but it used to be the case that the entire state of California didn't have one, right? It's unbelievable. So we said, let's step into the game. Let's connect you with 10 or 50, whatever, I don't remember what the number was, kids, and give them advice. Starting in 9th grade, 10th grade, tell them what courses to take. Tell them how to start thinking about college, how to apply for college, how to pay for college. And I'll tell you what was beautiful about it. And I remember 2 stories. So you're trying to replicate for these students the kind of network of information that an upper middle class kid takes for granted, right? So 2 stories. One, kid at Amherst talking to a kid in Arkansas or wherever, I don't remember, and says, you know, the kid finally says, okay, you convinced me, right? I could think about these places. I shouldn't let the sticker price stop me. But I don't want to go to a little school in the middle of nowhere in western Massachusetts. I don't know what he's referring to. The liberties of being a former college president. And I've heard Yale is pretty good, but no one I know has ever been to Yale. You know, it's completely distant. And the kid at Amherst said, oh, well, I've met kids at Yale at, you know, X function or debate tournament or whatever. I'll give you some emails, right? Suddenly you've replicated the social network that we take for granted, right? Or the second example was, kid in Idaho says, okay, you convinced me, but my mother doesn't believe you, right? She doesn't believe this is possible. This isn't the right kind of place for us kind of people. She doesn't believe you. And the kid at Amherst says, I get that. You know what? Let me get my mother to call your mother. We have great staff, just as Barnard and Columbia and institutes have great stuff. You can't replicate that, right? So you got to be creative. It's doable though.
Let me start by issuing one note of optimism. I moved to New York 3.5 years ago when I took this position, and I moved from Boston, which is also a city that cares a lot about education and has some great institutions of learning. One of the things that struck me instantly about New York was how vehement and at times almost violent the debates were over school reform. And I actually think that's a really positive sign. Even though there's various sides in the debate who are truly at each other's throats over what are the best paths to educate public school kids, K to 12, I think the fact that that debate is so robust is really encouraging. And as Tony was just mentioning, the fact that we're starting to see real political action and political posturing around the question of how to fix this country's K through 12 education system is a really good sign. I think this is a problem, is a real problem for which there is no single solution. So do we need to make the public schools better? Absolutely. Do we need to make the charter schools better? Yes. Do we need to have good parochial schools? Yes. All of the above and more and more and more. Because the more energy and money, quite frankly, that's brought to this debate, the better. So just the fact that we can fill a room with people talking about these questions is to me a really good sign. So, cheers. In terms of the actual solutions, again, I don't think there's any single one, and I'm guessing that every person in this room is working on some solution, and they're probably all good. This really is a case, one of those rare cases where Mao Zedong is right. let 1,000 flowers bloom. It's okay in this case. But I think you mentioned a word that I think is core here, and that word is scalable. Because ultimately, how many kids do we have in the New York public schools? 1.1 million. This is a problem that must be attacked with solutions that are scalable, because even with all the best intentions in the world, if we try and pick off each kid individually, it's not going to work. We need to find solutions that are scalable. I think there are certain things that the colleges have done, and Tony's being somewhat modest. He really led the charge at Amherst, and Amherst led the way with really reaching out in ways that very few colleges have done. Barnard has fewer resources, but we are throwing all of them that we can at this issue with programs like we have a Barnard Bound program, where we bring kids from rougher socioeconomic backgrounds here for summer. We get to experience the college. We pay to bring them here. We pay to bring prospective students here, so we take the cost out of the equation. We can do more and more of that. But ultimately, to make it scalable again, you've got to get into the high schools, you've got to get into the middle schools, you've got to get into the elementary schools. I was lucky enough to meet with this wonderful woman here in the second row, Lily Owen, who I will confess I hadn't met before this morning. It was totally coincidence, but she described to me what she and her colleagues are doing at Goddard Riverside with the Options program. This, to me, is the way to go, or one of the ways to go. It is a scalable solution that is training people to be college counselors in the public schools. I mean, how many college counselors are you hoping to train? 1,600 in 3 years. That begins to get to a scalable solution. You train the people who will go into the schools, who will work with the kids, who will generate the kids, who can then apply to the colleges and know what it's going to take and know how best to be prepared. And then finally, I also echo Tony's comment about the importance of involving the parents. Particularly for immigrant families, the college process is totally daunting. I held the hand of some friends of mine last year who were phenomenally wealthy, hugely wealthy couple. Neither one of them was educated in the United States. So even with all the money in the world, which they have, they didn't know how to get their kids through the college process because it's terrifying. And if you grow up in Europe or in Asia, it's a completely different process. You take a test and they tell you where you're going to school. It's very different here. It's better, but it's way more complicated. So what we've started to do is have sessions for parents in Spanish and Chinese, two of the most common languages in our neighborhood. I think we need to do more and more of that, because ultimately we're not going to get the kids in the door unless their parents not only know what the process is like, but are comfortable with sending, in our case, their daughters to this vaguely scary place. So it's really an effort that involves the colleges, all of the support organizations, goes all the way down to the elementary school level, and deeply involves the parents.
Incredible. Before we move on to the next section, I just want to do one quick follow-up, because I think there's something really in common that seems really striking to me. And Tony, you brought it up, but I think we're talking about the same piece here, which is if cost is functioning as a deterrent for some of these young folks that we want to target, how do we get to them? I mean, is there some kind of less tangible or, campaign-oriented or some kind of big scalable program that we can get out there that says, hey, universities are helping to pay for kids to go to school. Places like Barnard College, 50% of the students here might be on financial aid or more, right? And so how do we get that message out? Because for some reason, I remember growing up really, and I grew up in Newark, New Jersey. My parents didn't have a whole lot of means, but I remember just feeling that it was in the air that it was possible to go to college, that you could figure out a way through scholarships or financial aid, and if that is not there, that's a pretty big problem. So, I mean, are there specific ways of trying to address that?
Well, I think part of it is the single biggest source of information is going to be somebody sitting in the high school. So the more we can get counselors educated about the fact that there are these possibilities, there are these prospects, and that they're quite good, that will go a long way. I think, Tony and I have sat in on millions of meetings with various college organizations. The colleges should probably do some kind of a marketing campaign to let people know, yes, it looks like $60,000.
Just so we don't have to go to meetings anymore.
Yeah, that's right. But we have an awful lot of financial aid. And then finally, and this is a pitch I think I'm going to start making as frequently as I can, we as a sector need more financial aid. So So Amherst is in the enviable position of having being one of the wealthiest schools in the country. Barnard is much poorer, but we're still wealthy by comparison. And the truth of the matter is, at most colleges, which have a lower sticker price than the most selective schools, the financial aid is actually worse. So we need more financial aid. We just have got to get more financial aid, whether it comes through the government, whether it comes through the foundations, because right now, colleges like ours are in this absolutely bizarre shell game. Where the reason our sticker price is so high is because we are literally taking the money from the rich kids and giving it to the kids who can't pay. It's the right thing to do. I think we are the single greatest source of income redistribution in the world. No, I really do. I can't think of any other entity that is taking from the rich and giving to the poor. We're Robin Hood every single day. That's what we do. But the problem is, because I'm sad to predict, I do not think the U.S. economy is about to suddenly, take a turn for the much stronger. We are going to be in this Robin Hood position for a long time, and ultimately the only way we solve what will become an increasingly untenable balance is if we have more money to go directly to financial aid, so we're not just depending on the rich kids to help pay for the scholarship money.
According to, and we're going to start to talk a little bit about success, right? Still solution-oriented. According to the U.S. Department of Education, only 20% of young people who begin their higher education at two-year institutions graduate within 3 years. There's a similar pattern in four-year institutions where about 4 in 10 students receive a degree within 6 years. I wonder if you could sort of give us a sense of why that is the case. Are there any sort of metrics that you're aware of as to that underlie that? And then I'll have another quick question after that. Tony.
Well, first, I think we should just acknowledge that is not the experience at a Barnard or an Amherst. So I'm not sure where the experts are. I'm certainly not the expert to address it. I think, I hate the way this sounds, but again, part of it is you get what you pay for. America has chosen not to invest in education at the level that our competitive country, the countries we compete with, are paying for, right? I mean, there are no college counselors in high schools, in the public schools in most of America, because the budgets have been cut. And I understand, it's terrifying, but I do understand that if you're faced with a budget choice, you're going to try to keep more teachers in the classroom, even if it means you can't pay for the college counselor or the librarian, right? Those are choices that get made. They have been made. Terrifying choices. And it's also true in terms of funding of higher education, right? We talk about being internationally competitive, and what are we doing? We're underfunding the public universities, right? The community colleges, funding is going down. Just when we understand that we will lose the global competition if we don't invest in the fundamental infrastructure. And the fundamental infrastructure is people and skills, right? In this economy, that's all it's about, right? So I think.
Just briefly, I think the issue of retention is one that, at least in our part of the sector, we know how to do. Our graduation rates are very, very high, and they cut across all socioeconomic strata. My wonderful colleague Vivian, who's back of the room, is helping me look at some data to see if we have any patterns within our dropout rates, if you will. I don't think they show any socioeconomic dispersion. Elsewhere, because we know how to solve the problem. We give people financial aid, we take care of them, we have wonderful people, some of whom are sitting in the front row, who take care of the students. We can take care of them. You get to schools that are less richly resourced, they don't have the means to take care of those kids. Kids get bored, kids get frustrated, kids need money, kids need to work. If there's not someone there holding their hand saying, I can make this work for you, I can get you that Metro card, I can help you get a calculus tutor, you're going to lose them. The scariest statistic I've heard all year is the dropout or the graduation rate of returning veterans right now. Of the veterans who are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan right now, of those veterans who are enrolling in college, only 7% are graduating. That is a crime in this country. We know how to fix that, but like everything else, it takes money. So we can fix that.
Can I just add or agree with everything Deborah said? We will disagree before the evening's out. We've rigged it that way. The two things. One is, even at the most selective colleges, in the land, the Barnard, Columbia's, Amherst, Harvard, whatever, of the world, the students come with different strengths, right? I don't care who you are. Chances are you're going to be better at some part of the curriculum than others. And we have to acknowledge that, and we have to provide kids with resources, meaning, writing centers, quantitative skills centers, whatever it is, not as remediation, but as an acknowledgement that we all come to levels of education with different skills and different sort of strengths and therefore weaknesses. And then related to that, which is not being shy about that, not pretending that, oh no, we don't need to do that, right? We need to do that at the most selective colleges in the world, right? So of course you have to only do it. It's called education, right? In addition, I'll just say another component is another aspect of the social component that Deborah's been talking about so eloquently is how it feels to be on campus, right? And, my impression is it feels very different to feel like you're a part of a small token group than it does to feel like you are part of the student body that owns an institution. And I'm not, I was once a social scientist, but I wasn't a very good one. That's why I became an administrator. But I do believe this. I believe that critical mass makes a difference. And I saw this, so slightly getting away, but I think it makes a difference for retention. I saw this at Amherst, even just in the 8 years that I was there. When students stop feeling like they are part of a small group that is embattled, they stop acting like a small group that is embattled. And it changes the educational climate, and it changes the social climate. I actually, don't get me wrong, Amherst, no place is utopia, and in some sense I don't think it should be utopia, right? You don't want difference to disappear. That's not the point of diversity. But you do want people to sort of be okay with talking about their differences and exploring their differences, and not feeling like they have to be defensive about their differences or representative of their differences. And it really, when you get to that, at least at Amherst, I felt like we were getting close. It really changes the whole sort of way it feels, and in a positive way that I think makes a difference for retention. So again, acknowledging retention is not the issue that we face at Amherst.
Wow. I have like 1,000 follow-up questions, but we probably should move on, because I'm really interested in the conversation we're having now. Obviously, I'm at Lehigh University, and we're faced with a lot of the same challenges around issues of diversity, and retention is a real big problem for Lehigh for students of color, partially because we don't have a good enough understanding about how you create those communities that allow difference to be situated at a university in a kind of healthy way. So maybe if we have time when we get to the dialogue, we can go back to that. President Obama's 2020 strategic visions and goals. 10 million more graduates from community colleges, four-year colleges, and universities by 2020. Create and support opportunities for every American to complete 1 year or more of higher education or advanced training in his or her lifetime, focusing specifically on access, quality, and completion. Now, in your perspective, again, trying to move back to solutions, what are some of the barriers that students are facing? You guys have talked about some of these things in terms of not just getting to college, but also succeeding there, right? Some of our students probably have to go there.
We have a retention problem.
We have a retention problem. Right? No, but that's fine. But what
study.
Exactly. Get ready. But what can be done, and what are the retention programs or policies that have shown success?
well, I'm probably going to try to pick a fight a little bit. I think without taking issue with what Obama laid out, because it's all good stuff, I think we really do need to understand that college is very much not a one-size-fits-all. So, we both come from environments that are 4-year, very small, very selective liberal arts colleges. I think we deliver an extraordinary education, but it's probably not the right education for every kid in the country. I think we need to invest way more in community colleges, and we need to use words, even if we pretty them up a little bit, like vocational education, training. I have a very dear friend who happens to be an Amherst grad, who's the head of technical training for all of Northern Virginia. And he runs an amazing program that takes kids actually in high school, gets them directly into community colleges. Some of them graduate, move on from the community colleges to Virginia Tech, to the UVAs, but some of them graduate with a 2-year technical degree, and they go out and they get great jobs. Right now, the hottest area there is cybersecurity. This is not flipping burgers. This is a technical degree, it's a 2-year degree, but they are long. And I think that's not the solution for everyone either, but I do tend to think that in the United States we're a little bit snobby, particularly those of us who hang out among the ivy-covered walls, which we love, but it's not for everybody. And it's not means it's for the rich kids and the poor kids should do vocational tech. It means that these are options that should be available more widely, and at the risk, that's always terrible, I do this to my son. I have, of course, a very brilliant older son who just graduated with a very expensive, very illustrious 4-year degree in experimental theater. I'm not sure I got my money's worth. Follow that.
James, we could not keep ourselves. We're at your
We're
question.
at the next question
about.
And the next question is college for everybody.
Is college for everybody?
Where
yes.
we're going to have
so
some debate.
Yes. All right, I'm going to try to be nice.
And this question is a tough question.
It is a tough question. I think Deborah and I agree it's a tough question. Yes. So first, let me just, I certainly agree with Deborah that, there have to be different paths, but there also have to be paths between the paths. So one of the things that I confess I'm proud of that we did at Amherst was we basically took almost all of the transfer slots that we had and used them for community college graduates. And the argument was, and I say this somewhat timidly since I was once a transfer student, and I didn't transfer from the community college. So, call me a hypocrite, whatever you want. But the policy calculation was there are 1 million kids in community colleges, and you can't tell me that we can't find, Amherst is a small place, 20 a year who are absolutely off the charts amazing, right? And who need a path from the path they were on to the next path. Expensive, again, because they all needed complete financial aid, free rides. Interesting fact, the community college transfer students at Amherst have a higher GPA at Amherst on average than the average Amherst college students do. This is at the most selective college in America. So, I think the calculus was right about just,